from the outset wanted to work with ILM on Battleship.
There's a huge visual effects component to Battleship. The alien ships and the creatures had to be really dynamic and kick ass.
Our philosophy is that the best performance capture happens live on location.
The thing that ILM is known for is the incredible realism.
I don't think anyone's seen water created like this before.
The work they do is second to none.
The initial design idea that we worked on for the alien ships was taken from the idea of a water bug.
These are rough drawings of the recent fleet with Ringo, George, John, Paul. We'll call this one Elvis. They have a couple of different positions so they can get flat, but when they want to move or fight, they kind of come up. And we use water bugs, like different kind of water insects, as an inspiration, because if you look at the extreme close-ups of those animals, they're real violent looking, you know, and the way they move, they kind of leap. So, you know, when we sit with ILM, we're going to talk about ways in which they can move, which isn't classic rear propulsion, but that they can maybe almost jump.
He wants these ships to have character and to respond in interesting ways.
It doesn't just kind of come up like, and then it's up. It's got to be.
So that's what we started developing, going from illustrated versions of ships, and then we start modeling them. And then we start view painting them and looking at those and trying to make them look photoreal.
What we'll do is we'll have sort of renderings and just basic turntables of all of our ships so that we can see how they are, and then we'll start to put them into the shots and the real shot lighting, and we'll start to add in more detail and more textures and refine stuff from there.
We worked on designs for Ringo to have just this giant peg launcher array where there's just like rows and rows of them and they deploy out. To differentiate between, you know, the different alien ships, we gave them each their different color signature. So that this class of ship is blue, its intelligent pattern is blue. This one's green, this one's red, this one's yellow.
Not only do they breach up through the water, but they recycle water. They're always pulling water up through pipes and kind of recycling it out, so they're constantly pumping water all around them. And we knew we had to create a whole new water system at ILM, a new way of directing water and simulating water and being able to render it in very photoreal ways.
You start with a kind of a volume mesh, you know, water, which is not white. It's just a blue piece of volume. Then you start thinking about the white caps. The white caps are a different path. Then you use those white caps to generate particles. Those particles generate mist. And then you let the computer simulate all that.
One breakthrough we made on this movie was to be able to throw enough computer power at it that we could do the whole thing together. So all of these things are constantly interacting. And that's how we get that kind of completely physical, real look to it.
It's interesting to kind of see how this nugget of some idea with a lot of R&D and a lot of render time really led to kind of one of the most visually arresting shots in the movie. It's very important to Pete that everything has just a kind of a bit of personality, that every once in a while you kind of see behind that. And even something like a chainsaw whipping around a ball needed to have character.
The initial shredder designs were done by Neil Spizak and Aaron Hay in the LA art department. And they're basically like moving wrecking balls. They have a gyroscope in them so they can sort of steer in certain ways, but they're launched by the Ringo flagship.
In this specific sequence, the shredder is flying from one of the ships, coming into a freeway.
The shredder is going to bust through the car, and as it breaks through the car is going to cannon over.
3, 2, 1.
And basically pancake on top of this car. When we continue the action, we'll be detonating these K-rails. And then the shredder goes on about its business.
More kind of stuff you can kind of get live right there in camera, the better.
You know, the most successful shots are the ones in which we combine miniature work with practical effect, CG work, you know, all together.
Was very intent upon having a non-slimy alien. He wanted to have a region that looks foreign to our world, but breathes through a nose, sees through eyes, has appendages. Maybe they're a little special, but by and large, we recognize the form.
When we first started the show, we had one regent that we had to get out, and that was the land commander. As the show progressed, we had other characters like the thug, which were the henchmen, and then there was also the sea commander, who was in charge of, I guess, all of the battleships. There were a couple of other characters that were created. One was called Clarence, the ship scientist. And then also we had the background regents. This is the thug here in its flesh form without any of its armor. And it's neat because this kind of shows you what they're made up of and how their armor integrates with their skin. There's no real edge of where the blend happens. It's just a part of them. If you look here, this whole section here would be something that I would have sculpted. And then any of this mechanical stuff would come from Russell Paul's crew.
My role was really just to work on the suits of armor. And that was actually really challenging. All the armor that you see on all the aliens is very asymmetrical. We couldn't just build one side of it and copy it to the other side, which we typically can do. We actually had to build really everything twice. You know, we had to build specific armor to one side and then build different armor on the other side. So it was really challenging, but I think the aesthetic makes it really nice. It gives it something different.
Here's some of the biomechanical things where you've got a combination of mechanical parts which are integrating with flesh, which is really cool.
They have faces like we do. They have little holes in their faces, like ventilation holes to help with their breathing. And they also had this quill beard, which was made out of keratin, the same stuff that our fingernails are made out of.
After we've gone in and done all of the modeling, added all the detail, then the next job is to give them movement in their faces, what we call facial shapes, controls. These controls allow the animator to go in during a shot, animate the face, put a different expression on the character, basically act the character out. One of the things that first attracted me to this project, besides the design work on the face, was the hands. The hands are creepy. They look strange, and I thought it would be really cool to make.
He'd had this idea that one arm could be a tool. Came up with a lot of kind of designs for different tools that it could kind of change into, almost like a Swiss Army knife. We investigated that idea both with illustrations, then we started, with Glenn with animation, started animating a lot of tests for Pete, and then we actually built these proxy pieces that you could wear on an arm. One of the technologies that we like to use, during principal photography is ILM's iMocap system. Our thugs and our regents are suited up in kind of these gray suits, and they have their tracking bands.
They look a little silly when you're wearing them, but the intent is that all of those dots on the suits define a three-dimensional spot in space. We're able to get cameras that will tell us exactly what that motion is, and then we can replicate that motion onto the alien characters.
Pete calls them pajama guys. And he would say, Grady, when are you gonna get rid of those pajama guys? I'm tired of looking at pajama guys. And it's motivating because we want to replace all the pajama guys with our creatures, and it looks fantastic when we do. It just takes time.
Originally, when we shot these, all these aliens were stunt performers. So then we paint the stunt out of there, and we put the background. And you can see that it's kind of similar, but not quite, because things weren't exactly the same. So dimensionality is part of the challenge. We went through all kinds of discovery to find a perfect mixture between something that is alien and something that is human.
if something's on your chin, you know, you're wiping your chin. And so he's an alien, but he has human-like qualities, which makes him feel more real.
Or, for instance, there was an actor right there, but we had to replace all that, so this is all CG. This is not makeup. The tongue and the lips and the teeth, I mean, we've been working months on end for people to say, well, is this, how do you do this? Is this makeup or real? Or even the reflection of Hopper right here, you know, was all put in there. Then the change of the eyelid. You know, it's difficult to bring reality to these kinds of shots.
The actual visual effects in this movie are everything that I kind of love about visual effects.
These guys are so enthusiastic and really love to push the envelope, and they never say no to an idea.
As a visual effects studio, there's nothing more that you could ask for, really, than for the director to push your limits.
I always come back to projects that are really interesting and that push the innovation.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff we geek out on.
All trying to make my stupid little dreams come true.